While Messmer was known as a curse to the Hornsent and a traitor to the Golden Order due to his serpentine nature, he was also an inspiration to the men he led into the Land of Shadow. The Black Knights followed him from the lands between, leaving the Erdtree behind, and whether due to their fear of him or respect for his strength, the penal battalions he commanded fell in line. Messmer commanded many forces as he razed the Land of Shadow and burned it to the ground, but the strongest of these warriors are the Fire Knights. These knights were comprised of those who came from the upper echelons of noble families in the Golden Order, who believed so deeply in Lord Messmer that they would leave their easy lives, bathed in honeyed rays of gold, to follow him into battle, casting aside their family name and station. So who were the Fire Knights really? Thankfully, along with the more generic Fire Knights poised to ruin our day on our way to Messmer's chamber, there are 5 named knights worthy of exploring. Today, we're going to tell the stories of these Fire Knights and see what they tell us about the overall lore of Messmer and the Land of Shadow. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Elden Lore, our lore series breaking down the people, places, and factions of the Lands Between and the Land of Shadows. If this is your first time finding the channel, welcome. We hope you enjoy our content. If you're looking for the story of a specific character from Elden Ring, make sure to check out our playlist. With over 140 lore videos, we're building a comprehensive compendium of Elden Ring stories. We also have a Discord where our community comes together to talk about their favorite lore, characters, and builds from various FromSoft games. If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing, but no pressure. As always, your viewership is more than enough for us. With that said, let's get back to the stories at hand. While the Fire Knights were an elite force, they did have their own rank and file. These are the unnamed knights we face throughout the Shadowkeep, who fight us with Messmer's flame, their greatswords and short swords. Their helm and armor go a long way in telling us who they truly were. The Fire Knight helm is described as the pointed helm of the Fire Knights under Messmer the Impaler's personal command. Each and every knight hailed from a renowned family of the Erdtree's upper echelons, but were shunned and chased from their homes after pledging allegiance to Messmer as their master. The Fire Knight armor tells us it is armor of the Fire Knights under Messmer the Impaler's personal command, distinguished by its red cape and twin gold snakes which adorn the neck, enhancing incantations of Messmer's flame. These were the only ones who truly knew Messmer, his flames like serpents, the painful fate that accompanied his accursed form. So even those Fire Knights who remained unnamed were considered important enough to truly know Messmer on a more personal level. For me, this is reminiscent of the Cleanrot Knights, who presumably had a deeper personal connection to Malenia. If nothing else, these knights make it clear that Messmer was seen by some as righteous and worthy of being followed. These knights wield greatswords and short swords that undulate with fire, and have been blessed with a flame incantation. In this way, Messmer shared his fire with his knights. The incantation Fire Serpent gives us a better look at why he would do this rather than give them direct control over his fire. Incantation of the Fire Knights under Messmer the Impaler's personal command launches a flame with a serpentine coil. When the flame they received from Messmer would not find purchase within them, the Fire Knights relied on fire incantations to honor their bond. It seems that Messmer did indeed try to share his fire with his loyal knights, but for many, the flame would not find purchase within them. So instead, he imbued their weapons and outfitted them with a Fire Knight seal. Sacred Seal of the Fire Knights, who answer directly to Messmer the Impaler, enhances fire incantations of Messmer. The emblem of Messmer's army depicts a golden ring and the fire of his sacred seal. By doing this, his knights can still wield his flames on his behalf. Some would even go on to create more practical items with the strength of this flame. The Fire Knights cookbooks are records of crafting techniques left by the Fire Knights who served Messmer the Impaler. They detail the art of wielding fire for the benefit of soldiers setting out to join the crusade. Through these cookbooks, soldiers learned to create Messmer fire grease and fire coils, so that all fighting under Messmer's banner could cleanse the land in flame. This is how the Fire Knights would use flame to protect the keep and their lord. But what of those whom Messmer's flame did find purchase within? Well, they each have their own story, and we can do battle with most of them as we explore the Land of Shadow. The first Fire Knight we have the opportunity to do battle with is Queelign. This knight has his own questline associated with our fights, which can be done in any order. However, I believe the correct way to start this quest would be to first face him in the Bellarat Tower settlement. As we explore Bellarat, we can find our way to the gravesite plain where he will invade us, making his intentions clear from the start.
Stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame.
This is the same line Messmer speaks when we face him, so perhaps this was akin to a battle cry of the Fire Knights when they faced their enemies. Upon our first victory against him, Queelign drops the crusade insignia, which is described as a talisman depicting a raised spear on a backdrop of flames in remembrance of the lives lost in the sacred crusade led by Messmer. The warriors who fought in the crusade set aside both honor and mercy to wantonly impale and scorch those deemed impure. Those who felt invigorated by each cry of death were the same men who were certain of the sanctity of the campaign. As we can see, Crusader is certainly the proper term for these knights, as they were so sure of their purpose that they reveled in the slaughter of their enemies, believing themselves to be burning away those unworthy to sit beneath the Erd Tree. We can find Queelign again just before entering the Shaded Castle if we follow the main road past Castle Ensis. To the west of this path, we find the Church of the Crusade, which houses a Scadutree fragment, and our second encounter with this crazed knight. Once he invades us, he speaks again, sure that he will burn us away.
Thou shalt not evade the flame of Messmer.
If we happen to lose this fight, he says something interesting, addressing Queen Marika directly.
Queen Marika, behold, I have excised another cancer to thy joy.
So Queelign understood how personal this crusade was to the Queen, and if we defeat him, he says,
How could this be? Forsake me not, Queen Marika, my grace.
On this occasion, he drops the prayer room key and the Ash of War, Flame Skewer, an attack we recognize from Messmer himself. We don't meet with Queelign again until diving deep into the Shadowkeep and uncovering its mysteries. If you approach the keep from behind and find the back entrance, this is where you will find the prayer room which Queelign dropped the key for in our previous battle. Getting there can be difficult, but once we find our way to the entrance, there's no telling what we'll find behind that door. Most would assume there would be another battle with this bowl-cut sporting knight, but it seems his losses to our Tarnished have broken him. We find Queelign balled up on the floor, talking to himself.
Marika, mother to us all, favor me with thy grace. I have met many who would threaten or distress thee, and quelled each and all, and I hereby swear to never cease. So please, grant me thy grace. Leave me with my solitary light.
It's at this point we can choose to give him either the Iris of Occultation or the Iris of Grace. If we give him the Iris of Occultation, he sees only darkness and believes he's been forsaken by Queen Marika, which is actually accurate, considering she never had any intention of retrieving the forces sent to the Land of Shadows.
I would not. Am I not pure? Defile thee I would never. I ask, why wouldst thou think to purloin from me? Deignest thou not to look upon me? All this time, I held in my heart only thee.
We then find his greatsword, a weighty piercing sword with a blade that undulates like fire. Queelign devoted his all to the crusade and remade his greatsword in the shape of the lance wielded by his liege. aspiring to become a second Impaler. It seems Queelign was more fanatical than most when it came to his dedication to Messmer and Queen Marika. If we give him the Iris of Grace, he says,
Queen Marika, dearest mother, I shall silence all who would trespass upon thy peace, as decreed by the grace of gold. No soul shall thy sanctity imperil.
We are then granted his Spirit Ash, which gives us more insight into his fanaticism. Spirit of a Knight granted relief by the Iris of Grace. Wields a spear-like greatsword that impales foes upon fire, keeping the taint of impurity away from fair Mother Marika. That grace was his salvation, though it was but a fleeting blessing, and having been saved, all that was left to him was to wage war. It's not incorrect for those under her rule to refer to Marika as the dearest mother, but with Queelign, I believe this takes on a deeper meaning. He was not just obsessed with Messmer, but he mirrored him, aspiring to be a second Impaler, and showed deep dedication, an obsession with Marika. I believe Queelin's ultimate goal was to be seen as one of Marika's children himself, as he desperately tried to mimic her firstborn. This may explain why he is found locked in the prayer room, essentially caved in on himself. While he may have once been a trusted member of Messmer's forces, it's possible they now consider him to be unstable, and they needed to keep him under lock and key, just in case his obsession led to treason against his lord. Once we lower the water level in the church district, there's another Fire Knight we can do battle with outside of the entrance to the path that leads us to the Scattered Tree Avatar. This knight wears a tall mask with two sorrowful faces stacked upon it. This mask, the Death Mask Helm, is how we learn who this knight is. Helm of Wego, elder among the Fire Knights. Two warped death masks stacked one atop the other. Gnawed at by loneliness, the old man turned his attention to the spirituality of Messmer's flame, using it in a rite of resurrection. Yet the soulless bodies he brought back to life were no comfort to poor Wego. We can see as we do battle with Wego that there are numerous burning putrid corpses surrounding the area. These are the people Wego has brought back from the dead using Messmer's flame. It may be surprising to see this same flame that's brought destruction and has the power to burn away spirits themselves, grant life. However, it's a double-edged sword. Wego is said to be an old man who's engrossed himself in the spirituality of Messmer's flame, meaning that he must understand his flame is related to the Abyssal Serpent, a being that stands in contrast to the Golden Order. I'm willing to bet that Wego was the last of his noble family in the Lands Between, and that's why he chose to follow Messmer. His helm itself may be the death masks of his loved ones, possibly a wife and child. Perhaps he thought he could bring back his family through the resurrection rites of the flame, but unfortunately, due to the nature of the thing itself, anything he brings back is only a physical body. The spirit within has already burned away. It's also worth noting that every Fire Knight in the Church District wears the Death Mask Helm. I do believe that the one we fight surrounded by these putrid corpses is Wego himself, due to the fact that he clearly brought them back from the dead. But it's possible that the rest of the knights in this area were actually under his command, thus they would wear the mask representative of their commander. That said, we find Wego in the Church District, perhaps living in self-pity, surrounded by those he could not properly return to life. However, this was likely not always the case, and he must have performed his duties as a knight during the Purge, because another of the named Fire Knights is actually said to have been a disciple of poor old Wego. Salza is encountered on the bridge leading from the Shadowkeep to the Rao Ruins. This Fire Knight has perfected an incantation no other can wield, possibly having created it himself after taking on Messmer's flame. Salza is able to rain fire down upon us as we make our way toward the exit. But once we fight him face to face, he seems to be no stronger than your typical Fire Knight. Upon defeating him, we receive his hood and incantation. His helm tells us it is the Hood of Salza, Sage of the Fire Knights. A prodigious amount of cloth wound around it, giving the impression of a greatly swollen head, and wearing it increases intelligence. A disciple of the elder Wego, he refused to burn down an old ruin, at the risk of his own life. His incantation, Rain of Fire, tells us it's the incantation of Salza, Sage of the Fire Knights. Summons a cloud of flame overhead that pelts foe with rain of fire from above. Salza's disdain for barbarism never waned, even as he burned more villages and scorched more land than any other. When taking these two descriptions into account, it seems as though Salza may have reached a breaking point during the crusade against the Hornsent. I believe what we're being told with these items is that Salza, at the beginning of the crusade, believed wholeheartedly that they were in the right to be destroying everything remotely related to the Hornsent, razing it to the ground. But over time, his conviction may have waned. Apparently, he found something about this land worth preserving, and we can look at Fire Knight Hilde to learn exactly what that was. While we dig through the secrets of the Shadowkeep, we can make our way up to the rafters of this great structure, and while exploring there, we can find the spirit ashes of Fire Knight Hilde. A spirit who belonged to the Fire Knights, an order which answers directly to Messmer. Hilde swings a slender greatsword and casts fire incantations. Hilde was a dear friend to Salza the Sage, and joined those who urged that the specimens be preserved. Hilde's ashes were enshrined as a charm to protect the storehouse. This tells us all we need to know about Hilde. She believed that the specimens should be preserved, as they may serve a purpose in the future, perhaps as a way to combat the spread of omen babies being born in the lands between, or maybe just so that history would not be forgotten, so that it couldn't repeat itself. It's likely she and the other Fire Knights didn't know they'd be forever separated from the lands between when she gave her life to act as protective spirit ash. The other important detail in this description is her relationship to Salza. As his close friend, perhaps it was Hilde's words that reached Salza and convinced him he should not burn down this old ruin. Maybe the ruin referred to here is the Shadowkeep itself, and the two of them convinced their Lord Messmer that instead of destroying this place, they should instead take it for themselves, preserving the specimens within. Such a proclamation would of course mean putting their lives on the line, but Messmer respected his forces and saw logic in their words. Yes, Messmer was a zealot, but he was no one's fool, outside of his mother. The last named Fire Knight we can encounter in the Land of Shadow is Kood, the very knight that guards the way to Messmer himself. While fighting Kood, he uses the unique art of war, Flame Spear. Skill of Kood, captain of the Fire Knights. Ready weapon for a thrusting attack, and unleash a spear of flame straight ahead. This is one of those rare occasions where the description of an art of war gives us the most important detail of a character. Kood was not just a trusted knight, he was the leader of this force, just below Messmer. Upon defeating Kood, he drops the Winged Serpent Helm. Helm of Kood, captain of the Fire Knights. A winged serpent perches atop it. The Winged Serpent is the token creature of Messmer's military forces. It is a wise friend, which keeps the base serpent at bay and holds its power in check. This is very interesting to me, because what I believe it's saying is that the Winged Serpent we see flowing in and out of Messmer's body is actually part of the seal that keeps the Abyssal Serpent in check, along with the seal placed by Marika on Messmer's eye. Regardless of what this item just taught us, the story of Kood is the most straightforward of the Fire Knights. He is their leader, directly relaying the words and orders of Messmer to the others of his order, while defending his lord from any and all threats that would approach. Too bad he wasn't prepared for us. This brings us to the end of all the named Fire Knights, but there are a few other details worth examining. You don't face any Fire Knights aside from Queelign outside of the Shadowkeep, which makes sense, as Messmer's keeping his most elite forces close by. It's also interesting that 2 of the exits found within the Shadowkeep are guarded by these named knights. meaning that Messmer did not want anyone wandering into the keep to be able to make their way out, or for any of the Hornsent found within to be able to escape during the crusade. Even the unnamed Fire Knights are some of the most powerful enemies you'll face walking around the Land of Shadow, and their strength is more than commendable. These knights left their lives behind, chased from their homes, because they believed in the goal of Messmer the Impaler, the Holy Crusade, secretly sanctioned by Queen Marika. Kood, Salza, Wego, Hilde, and Queelign fought directly under Messmer the Impaler himself. Each of them had his ear, as he treated these knights as equals, and each should be remembered after we finish our time in the Land of Shadows. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of the Fire Knights, the elite forces of Messmer the Impaler. Do you believe Queelign was loyal to Messmer, or did he serve a higher purpose under Queen Marika? Was Kood the one who stationed his Fire Knights at the exits of the Shadowkeep, or did that order come from Messmer directly? Was the old ruin Salza refused to burn down the Shadowkeep itself, or perhaps the ruins of Rao? Do we actually face Wego when we explore the Church District, or are we simply fighting his forces? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and set notifications to all, so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.